Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present today in the International Conference on Green Energy and Environmental Technology, ICGEET 2026. My name is Pandu K. Utomo, and I'm joining you online. Even so, I'm very glad to be a part of this session. And today, I would like to share our paper titled Lost Vitality, the hidden friction between technology and ecology in Indonesia's new capital. This study looks at Nusantara or IKN and asks a simple but important question. When a project is presented as smart, green, and ecological at the same time, what actually happens to ecology once those promises are translated into planning documents? Let me begin with the broader context. As, as this slide shows, across the global south, states are increasingly using ecological narratives to legitimize large-scale urban transformation. And Nusantara sits within that wider family of projects alongside cases such as NEOM, Masdar City, and Forest City. The important point here is that sustainability language doesn't simply describe environmental concern. It also works politically, helping justify exceptional planning control, massive infrastructure investment, and new territorial arrangements. Now, the paradox of Nusantara becomes much clearer. On one side, the project is framed through the language of Forest City and Spong City, which suggests restoration, biodiversity, and hydrological resilience. But on the other side, it is driven by smart city logic that is highly engineered, digital first, and technocratically managed. This photo, for example, here is important because they visually anchor that tension in Sumbu Kebangsaan in IKN. From this image, we can sense how monumental state space and ecological promise are being assembled in the same landscape, but not necessarily in the same material logic. This is the theoretical lens. So urban political ecology, or UPE, helps us read the city not as a natural technical container, but as a socio-natural formation shaped by power, infrastructure, and uneven ecological outcomes. Actor network theory, or ANT, is used more selectively. If you look at the second point here, the emphasis is that plans, guidelines, and manuals are treated as active actants. That is meaning they don't simply record decisions, but help distribute roles and constraints across soils, roads, infrastructure, and other material actors. Based on this table, you can see the architecture of the document corpus. The first cluster establishes the ecological promises of the project. The second cluster introduces the technical and infrastructural specification. And the third cluster shows how those ecological realities are ultimately translated into metrics, reporting, and political milestones. So this table already reveals the analytical sequence on our study. Ecological is first promised, then technically reorganized, and finally strategically narrated. If you pay attention to this slide, it shows that the method is deliberately diagnostic rather than confirmatory. We use manual comparative document analysis, focusing on not only on recurring terms, but also on absence, substitution, and shifts in scale. And from this three-stage coding procedure shown here, extraction, qualification, and translation, we can see that the core objective is not to measure physical damage directly, but to trace how design governance gradually redistributes precision away from living system and toward engineered infrastructure. This is the first main result, representational stabilization. If you read the bullets here, the key move is ecological legibility. Complex living systems become visible to governance mainly when they are converted into hectares, seeding counts, and carbon values. So, from this slide, we can understand that ecology is not erased. Rather, it is stabilized into forms that are easier to count, report, and display than to sustain as dynamic ecological processes. Now, if you look at this figure, it visualizes that first mechanism very effectively. On the left, we begin with porosity and spongicity commitments, which are still rich in ecological complexity. In the middle, the figure shows the translation mechanism inside governance documents, where ecology is reformulated into categories, indicators, and administrative terms. And on the right, from this figure, we can see the final output: mapped nature, monitored nature, and visually demonstrable nature. So, what this image really tells us is that ecological richness becomes governable by becoming simplified. The second mechanism is infrastructure discipline. Multi-utility tunnels, integrated services, and other smart systems demand what the slide calls subsurface spatial dominance. If you pay attention to the asymmetry here, infrastructure is specified with engineering precision, while soils, roots, and hydrological processes are acknowledged only in broader principle. So the point is biological realities are forced to adapt to rigid grids of technical reliability. This figure helps us to see that friction in a much more material way. We move from ecological mandates toward infrastructure reality, and in the middle, we encounter the translational friction zone. From this figure, we can tell that the conflict is not only conceptual, but spatial and subsurface. For example, roots, permeability, and hydrological continuity, they are facing the hard demands of utility corridors, compaction, and concrete ordering. So the picture or the figure show us a simple but powerful point. That is, ecology survives, but under infrastructural terms. The third mechanism is temporal compression. The project is governed through several competing timelines: political time around 2024 and inauguration readiness, metric time around 2030, and net zero reporting, even biological time extending to 2060 and beyond for forest succession. But from these bullet points, we can see that ecological restoration is being asked to perform within timelines that are fundamentally too fast for the biological systems it claims to support. From this figure, we can see the mismatch becomes even more visible. The upper track represents political and metric urgency, while the lower track represents ecological succession and much longer duration required. From the image, we can immediately see where the friction lies. political milestones move quickly and visibly, while ecological time is slow, cumulative, and not easily accelerated. Okay, this slide gives the core concept of our study. Loss vitality refers to the gradual thinning of ecological capacity through the ordinary grammar of state planning. And this is a crucial point. If you look at the second line here, the argument is that ecological dispossession doesn't occur only in the obvious gap between promise and reality, but within operative governance itself. That is, inside the normal documents, standards, and planning procedures that appear rational and progressive on the surface. Now, if you look at this framework, it brings the entire argument together in one diagram. This figure shows how ecological commitments move through a chain of translation from normative promise into design governance and finally into strategic narration and metric evaluation. From this figure, we can see that representational stabilization, infrastructural discipline, and temporal compression are not separate problems. They are interlocking mechanisms that cumulatively produce lost vitality. This discussion slide sharpens the theoretical implication. The quotation here is important because it captures the central claim of the study. The state doesn't need to deny ecological complexity in order to dominate it. It only needs to render it into forms that are measurable, coordinated, and governable. So, based on these findings, the real site of ecological loss is not only the construction site or the finished landscape, but design governance itself. The slide extends the argument comparatively. If you look at the bullets, Nusantara is not treated here as an isolated failure. No, but as a part of wider pattern of technocratic eco-modernism visible in projects such as NEO, Masdar City. Now, from these findings, we can see why the study moves beyond a general greenwashing critique. The issue is not just that green claims are misleading, but that ecological loss begins much earlier when nature is routed through dashboard visibility, past biomass metrics, and top-down territorial transformation. If you look at the 4 questions here, spatial, substratal, temporal, and institutional, they effectively become a diagnostic audit for testing whether ecological systems are given real authority in urban development. So rather than asking only whether a project used environmental language, this audit asks something more demanding. Do soils, roads, hydrology, succession, and long-term maintenance actually shape the design logic of the project? That, in a sense, is the key practical findings of the research. So, to conclude, this presentation has argued that the contradiction in Nusantara is not simply a future implementation problem. The deeper issue is that ecological commitments are already being translated into forms that privilege states' legibility. In that process, ecological language remains highly visible, but ecological agency becomes progressively thinner. Thank you for your attention, and then I look forward the discussion of this presentation. Once again, thank you.